You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to Orange County's longest running business talk show. That was unplanned, that little noise, but I am your host, Rick Franzi, and we have our guest today, Richard Medcalf, who is the founder of Xquadrant. Richard, welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi Rick, it's great to be here.
So you've been in this practice, this coaching business. You've been in business for quite some time, but you've had your own coaching practice for a little over 5 years now. I'm wondering, take us back. What was your entrepreneurial motivation to create this coaching practice?
Yeah, well, the first thing is, little secret let you into, I don't like being a coach. It sounds a terrible thing. You know, coaches like everyone and their grandmother these days is a coach, right? And it really gets used around. So, but what I love doing is, and what I realized one of my gifts is helping people think strategically and find the really big levers that move things in their life, and then figure out what is it in me that I need to change in order to actually make those things happen. And that's kind of what excited me. If you go back 5 or 6 years, I was at Cisco Systems. I was in a small team set up by the CEO of Cisco to fulfill basically rash commitments that he would make to other CEOs in AT&T and I don't know, huge kind of Cisco partners and customers. And generally we'd get the phone call saying, hey, can you go and do something in this area? Can you strategize, turn our basic high level idea into something that would make a difference in the business, that would move the needle, and that would then have to mobilize people to do that together. So it was a great role. And before that, I'd been a strategy consultant, which is also fun. But I got to a stage where I was thinking, what is the impact that I want to leave? What's the stories that I want to tell my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, whatever in the future? And I started to realize that it wasn't about helping AT&T increase their EBITDA margin by 0.1% or whatever I might be able to do. There's nothing wrong with that. I love helping clients create financial results. It's fun. But there was a deeper story that I wanted to tell. I wanted to tell the stories about the lives that I'd impacted, the leaders who I'd been able to take to another level, the people who have been able to do create more impact for their business, for their people, and for the planet, right, for the world and the markets that they're operating in. And so it was that realization that the results were important, but I also wanted to help people maximize their potential, and that I had a gift for that. So that's, I suppose, really the foundation and the motivation for getting into what I do now.
Very inspiring. I'm wondering, after you decided, you left the corporate world, you hung your shingle out, how long did it take you to truly believe that the business that you were creating was going to thrive?
Yeah, well, on one level, you might, I think one level, you're never entirely sure, right? There's always a question. I mean, like
Right.
Blockbuster Video was thriving until it didn't thrive anymore, right? Kodak was thriving. So everything probably has a life cycle. And I think when I went in, one of the points I made was, if I'm going to do this, then I'm committed to it, but nothing's forever. And so you never know. And I'm saying that not because I have any doubts, and I'm totally committed to what I do and I love it. But just that realization that things do change, right? That's the world we live in. There's shocks and changes and new opportunities that emerge. But I think the belief, there's a phrase, isn't there? The first sale is always to yourself. And I think there was a moment when I was talking to my own coach, and I said, this is early days, and I said, I'll know that I'm a real world-class coach when I've got world-class clients. How would you know otherwise? That's got to be the proof. And he said, well, Richard, perhaps you only ever get world-class clients once you know that you're a world-class coach.
Wow.
And it was that self-belief
Right.
that I think when I kind of got to that point was actually, yes, I have 25 years of working with the C-suite. I've got this experience in Cisco. I went to, I did this. I've got my academic credentials. I've got all these things, the strategy thinking. I bring something a bit different from your general coach because I have that strategic mindset, that tech sector expertise and that kind of coaching skill set. Then when I started to really believe that, then I started to see those clients come in. You know, some of my clients, they run $2 or $3 billion companies. Other of them are having record growth levels. You know, they're kind of scaling up their businesses. One of them just raised 200 million in financing, etc. Right? Some of them are smaller, right? Some of them are 50 people, but doing really extraordinary things in the world. And I think now I look at the client list and say, yeah, these are world-class clients. You know, these are people at the top of their game. And that was, I think, the pivot. It was that internal sense of, you know what, I can add value, and that was the difference.
That's really a teachable moment here on the Business Talk Show. Thank you for giving this, Richard, because so much of an entrepreneur's life, in my experience, because we've interviewed a number of them here on the program, I too am one, is between your ears. People can't see, but on my wall, I have a quote that says, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
You're right.
And it's attributed to Henry Ford. But it just reminds me that mindset is such an important aspect, especially when you're a solopreneur. And you're really depending on yourself for that feedback loop on how am I doing and where am I going. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your firm, Xquadrant. You know, I read that in the work that you're doing with these world-class entrepreneurs, there are also people who want to 10x their impact and influence. And so I'm wondering if we could spend a little bit of time with specifically the type of strategy work that you're doing and how you help them achieve these lofty goals.
Yeah, and it's a buzzword, isn't it? 10x. It sounds like a buzzword. But for me, it's really important because I've realized that not everybody has that exponential way of thinking.
Right.
A lot of us, we get stuck in the operational detail. We get overwhelmed by all the stuff on our plate. We get stuck in what worked for us in the past, you know, our success formula that worked in the past. And we're not really focused on what's going to move us from incremental to exponential, what's going to multiply our impact. And for me, that's the essence of the strategic thinking, right? There's always something which is the limiting factor, right? The weakest link in how we're operating. And there's things in the market and in our business we need to work on, but there's also a thing internally, as in we've got limited time, attention, resources, everything else, and we need to decide where we're going to focus those and what are we going to address. I can talk a bit more about that, but so the typical scenario is somebody will come to me, perhaps they'll say, you know what, Richard, you know, I'm a great hands-on leader. You know, I've like built my business. I know how to make things happen operationally, but I know there's more. I know I need to be kind of being less directive, less doing and more directing, you might say, right? Less hands-on and more strategic, more transformational. You know, I need to perhaps be working on that next level of impact, having higher level conversations, trying to perhaps spearhead bigger deals that our company's ever done before, or create new partnerships, or just take time to think about the bigger picture. So those are often the kind of things people are feeling. And I have an approach called the Impact Multiplier approach. And basically the first principle is you're operating in a system. And so this system has found its natural equilibrium. So there is some limiting factor that's stopping you from going further. So let's identify that limiting factor. Second thing is there's 4 main areas that I would invite people to focus on as a start. So I focus first of all on yourself, and then your team, and then your organization. And each of these levels, we can apply these same 4 factors to. So the first factor is commitment, right? Like it's almost the limitation of the heart. Am I truly committed to what I say I'm committed to? Do I really want this? Is it really important? Does it inspire me, or does it inspire my team? Does it inspire the organization? Is it inspiring? Is it clear? Is it something I want to get out of bed for? Is it something which is so freaking important, nothing is going to stop me, right? Or is there fear that's getting in the way? Am I a bit, I think it's a should have, it's not really a must have, or whatever. So the first thing is to really get clear on that. Sometimes we're not moving forward because actually we're quite comfortable and we don't really see it's worth it. So that's the first one. The second one is around attention, and that's really the limitation of the mind, right? It's like, where am I focusing my limited attention? Am I working on the almost the easy stuff? I mean, it might feel a lot of it, but it's more the volume is the issue. But actually you're in your comfort zone when you're dealing with the day-to-day stuff. And perhaps you're focusing on that and not those higher level activities, which are more of a, there's more angst, perhaps. They're scary, they're new, they're ambiguous. You're not quite sure how you're going to do them. They're going to move things forward. And so attention is really important. What am I putting my focus on, and what things are going to grow as a result? So that's the second one. The third one is action, the limitation, if you like, of skills and habits. So we might have the insight in, that we know what we want and we're focusing on it, but we just haven't quite got the habits to make it happen. When we're falling back into the old ways, we're not delivering. And so there might be some key skills that are our limiting factor, or some key habits to build, behaviors to create. And then the fourth one is influence. I like to say we never have enough influence to achieve our goals, because if we did, we'd have already have achieved them. If you perhaps you're great, you can influence your team, but not your business. Perhaps you can influence, your customers, but not at the C-suite level. Perhaps you can influence a certain level of client, but not the one that's 10 times bigger. Perhaps you can influence your immediate customer base, but not your industry or not your country or whatever it is. So there's always a new level of influence, which again might be holding us back. And so I love to kind of help people look at that, get a bit strategic, and zoom in on what are the couple of key things that we need to work on that's going to unlock everything else. And what I find is when you do that on yourself, and then you do it on your team and on the organization, it starts to become quite a narrow to-do list. It's a focus. I could go on for ages, as you can see, but that's kind of, if you like, at the heart of it, is being quite strategic about what is it where I am kind of pushing the limits of my reality.
So let me unpack that just a little bit, because I was taking notes as you were talking, and a couple of thoughts came into my head. First of all, is it your experience that when you work with these teams, that through your process, the limitations become readily apparent, or do you have to guide that discussion so that people can then see maybe the forest for the trees?
Yeah, I think people start in different places. Often people will come and say, "Oh, I'm just overwhelmed. I've got so much going on." So that's often the thing that people will start with. So much so, I'm writing a book on that. That whole question of how do we free up time is so important, right? Just because it comes up so often. But there's always those different areas. There's like the insights, which is I see the world in a certain way. Some things are possible, some things are impossible. And that's where I'm living. And so sometimes in those conversations, I'll try to mess with people's thinking so they suddenly see things in a different way, and new things become possible. And that's an insight moment. And that's important. But sometimes as well, it's like, well, we know what the issue is. It's quite obvious. But it's like anything else. You might know you need to lose a few pounds, or, do some sport. But doing it is another thing, right? Building those habits, actually turning that into reality, is a whole different game. And so sometimes the focus is more on skills acquisition or behaviors, and not always on the pure insights.
Yes, knowing and doing are two different things. And people can live in a known state of unhappiness, but not make the changes they need to achieve the goal. So there's a psychological aspect to what I hear your work is, to help people to uncover this as well.
Yeah, let me give you an example. Today I was speaking with a CEO of a very successful business, about 500 people, and we started to get into his success formula, how he was operating, what the issues were. I won't go into all the details, but he got to the stage where he said, "You're right, Richard." He says, when somebody comes up to me with an operational issue, I love it, because I love analyzing it and looking at the data and helping them. And I know it's not a good thing in a sense, because I'm doing their job, I'm kind of getting involved, and they're coming to me, but I know I'm creating this kind of cycle where I'm taking responsibility for things that they should be taking responsibility for, all these things that, I'm getting too involved, I'm having to solve my team's problems, they're kind of almost getting passive, just giving things to me to solve. I see this as a bit of an issue. And I know that if I created more space in my diary to work on strategic things and actually, perhaps think about international expansion, where am I going to open my next offices and things, I said, I know that's important, but if I think about it, I'd actually feel guilty if I was to create that time, because I feel I'd be letting people down over here on the operational side. And so it was interesting because he got it. He realized intellectually he knew what he should be spending his time on as chief executive. But there's that visceral like feeling of, I know when I do this, then I add value.
Mm-hmm.
And if I and that's a quick win that I can do over here. And am I prepared to kind of let go of that buzz for the longer, more strategic projects which might take longer to come into fruition? And am I going to be prepared to live in that discomfort of letting my team do things a bit imperfectly so that I can actually put my focus on what matters? And it was a great insight moment for him. But it's not the end of the story, right? Then we're working on how are we going to actually help him in that moment address that feeling and make a different choice. It's one thing to know it intellectually, but then you have to turn it into decisions.
Yeah, because that's only a part of the battle, but that's an important part of the battle, which is the self-awareness of his own contribution to the inability of the company to grow past the size they're currently at, which is a great first step. I'm sure you've encountered CEOs and leaders who are almost blind to their own influence on the company in a way that's preventing it from becoming. It's hard. I'm sure that's a hard conversation for you to have with CEOs to say, actually, your habits are contributing to the limiting factors that have to be addressed.
Yeah, there's always a cycle. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I always ask my clients, like, how are you contributing to this?
Right.
Because we can change ourselves, and it's victim mentality if we just blame, our team aren't up to standards, the market's not right, everything else. That's why I like to bring it back to those impact multipliers, starting with us. Like, where am I getting in the way? Once I'm working on that, it then becomes easier to think, okay, now where's my team? Where are we together as a team? And it's the same thing, as a team, as a leadership team, are we really committed to a clear and clear common vision? All right, is our attention focused on the strategic things? Are we working on those actions which are really going to make the difference and take us out of the operational? And as a team, are we able to influence the company, the market, and so forth? So it's the same thing at that level as well. So it's always this question. I call it strategic laziness. Don't do everything. Do the things that actually move the needle.
Yeah. Have you found in your working with these folks that some of them, when they truly get clear on what it's going to take and what life would be like when they get that significant impact and influence, that they decide, well, maybe it's not what I really wanted? Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, I think it's important to at the start to really sit down with somebody and go quite deep and find out, like, what are you really trying to do here? That's where that one about commitment is so important,
Right.
because commitment will become a limitation, and it might not be the first limitation, but at some point you go, you know what? Do I really want to go to the next level? And often it's things like, well, but if I was to do that, I'm going to have to work even harder than I do today. I'm going to have to keep sacrificing my family life. I can't do it on my health. I can't do that anymore. I have to play with people thinking at that point. I was like, well, hang on. What if you could have both? So what happened if your next level as CEO involves you having 10 times as much impact and working less? Because I believe actually when you do less, you focus yourself on those higher value activities. So, but it's a different paradigm, right? It's not in their initial reality. It's like, the only way I know how to create results is to be working 60 hours a week or whatever it is. I love to say you've got two options. You've got the accelerator pedal and the gear stick, right? So you can't change gear when you've got your foot on the accelerator. But most of us, we go through life with our little success formula that's working, and we've jammed our foot on the floor. We've hit the ceiling of complexity. We can't go through it. We're overloaded. Our team, everyone's maxed out. And there is another level that's going to require a bit of investment of our time to create something different. But we can't see that because we've just got tunnel vision. We've got the foot on the floor.
That's a great analogy. I am going to borrow that, if I may. I will give you credit for it based on my learnings here. But I really like that idea that you can't shift gears with your foot on the accelerator. So thank you. You've used the phrase Impact Multiplier, and I know that you over a year or so ago you launched your own podcast with that name. Can you tell us a little bit about the motivation for starting your podcast and what the show's about.
Yeah, so it's called the Impact Multiplier CEO, is the name of the podcast, and it started off because I have a small number of high achieving clients, high impact clients, CEOs and C-suite leaders, and founders and owners, and I wanted to kind of start to share some of their stories, some of the insights that I have. Some of the ways that I would work with leaders, some of the principles. And so we started off by doing a few seasons where I'd share my own content. And then we also interviewed a few clients and contacts who are in the CEO position about their own stories and about their leadership lessons. And then over time, as things have grown a bit, I realized we could perhaps merge those together. So now I do a bit less of my own pure play episodes. And I tend to interview high achieving leaders. I interviewed leaders of $5 billion companies with 200,000 employees. I've interviewed startups, leaders and everyone in between. And I'm always interested in what's the intersection between that person and the business. Between who they are and how they lead and what the results have been. So we've looked at some of the world's fastest growing companies as measured by the Financial Times, and we've interviewed those CEOs. We've looked at CEOs who are new in the role, various things. And what I do is I try to weave into that some of my own principles and concepts, like some of the ones we've been talking about today, into those discussions to kind of bring them to life with the examples that the leaders are putting on the table. And it's been a lot of fun. And I think it's interesting because it really is like a show, I'd say, for CEOs or for people who want to think like a CEO, because you really get into the mind of some incredibly successful leaders.
And that's a powerful place to be, right? Because I believe in the power of peer learning, and we can learn from the others' examples, and so much can be gained from that. So I'm glad you've made the commitment to doing your podcast, and I'll have to make sure to check it out when I have time. Let's talk about tomorrow for you with your firm. Where do you see the evolution of your firm?
So a few things. This year we launched a CEO mastermind group where we have a whole bunch of really interesting chief executives from the US and from Europe mainly. And that group's going really well. We've gone deep pretty quickly with that group, and we meet up kind of quarterly. We're doing a retreat in June, and that's going really well. And the idea is each supporting each other in that quest to 10x some part of their life or business. So that's a lot of fun. So the part of it is to really expand that as well as the one-to-one work. And then there's some group programs that we're looking to scale out. So I have a small team who support me at this stage. So I think probably over the next couple of years there'll be, I think, continuing just to work with those key clients who I love, and then I think just finding ways to make available some of that stuff to a wider audience. That's another key theme. There's a book, as I mentioned, which will be coming out probably at the end of probably in the fall, around making strategic time, and that'll be fun, and see where that takes things.
So I invite you to come back on Critical Mass Business Talk Show when your book launches in the fall, because you've made that intention and commitment. It's recorded. It's out there now. People have heard it. So be happy to help you to achieve that goal.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So how does someone connect with you on LinkedIn or learn more about your firm, Richard?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Richard Medcalf with a D and no E on the end. Or you can go to xquadrant.com. So Xquadrant with a Q, just like the word, with an X at front. And if you want to find the podcast, that's all, the Impact Multiplier CEO on all those on all standard channels for podcasts. And I guess the last thing is I have a series on this whole idea of exponential leadership, right? About the impact multipliers and actually about that journey that you want to go on. It's like a 3, 5 or 6 part email series, and a lot of people have found that really valuable. So if people are interested in that, I've set up a link for them. They can just go to xquadrant.com/critical mass, one word, and they can just read a bit about that. And that might be an interesting way into my world and what I do. It gives you some quite interesting ways of thinking about where am I being incremental in my leadership, and what might it take, what might the barriers be in my own business that I might want to put my focus on.
Well, thank you for offering that to our audience. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for being a friend of the program and a part of our business community here as a thought leader.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been a lot of fun. I love what you're doing. You know, you've got longevity, right? Which is a certain proof all by itself, right? That you're making an impact. So long may you multiply it.
Thank you. And this is Orange County's longest running business talk show. Your episode, Richard, is episode number 1356 in our catalog. And if you're an Orange County entrepreneur and you would like to share your story with our audience, then I would say connect with me. I'm Rick, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. And that's also my website, rickfranzi.com. And until the next time we have a chance to be together, I hope all of your business decisions will lead you in a positive direction.